Today we are going to explain 2024 film called White Bird: A Wonder Story. The story tells you a sweet tale between a boy and girl in a war-torn country. Their innocent love surpasses the cruelty of war, revenge, and vengine. The movie begins showing our protagonist Julian Albans, who is struggling to fit in at his new school. He comes home from school one day and finds his grandma Sarah has arrived for a visit from Paris to attend a work at the Met. Although Julian has a distant relationship with his parents, he has a warm relation with his grandmother and opens up to her about his struggles to fit in the new school. Julian tells her that the lesson he learned from his experience with Auggie is to try to blend in and be normal. Grandma tells Julian that he doesn't need to be normal and tells him the story of her childhood. It was in the French countryside, and the village was peaceful and full of life, nature, and magical blessing of the god. Now the story flashback to France 1942, where we see the young grandma Sarah Blum lives with her father Max. He a surgeon and her mother, Rose, who was a mathematics professor. They lived happily in a middle-class apartment in a German-occupied town. Sarah visits the local cinema with her friends. There her classmate Julian Bomi works as a projectionist. Sarah's friends and classmates all tease Julian because he suffers from polio and walks with a crutch, and grandma admits she didn't even know his name, as everyone referred to him as the crab because of the way he walked. Sarah focuses on her studies and her art. One day, her teacher Miss Pettit-Jean encourages her to share a drawing she has made of a bird in the window and to pursue being an artist, stressing the importance of imagination. Sarah then goes to a local bakery where the store owner is hesitant to serve her and refuses to accept her money. That night, Sarah learns that Rose has been fired from her school because she is Jewish. That night, Rose and Max had a fight at dinner, as Rose wants to remain optimistic, but Max no longer believes they are safe and that the Germans view them as second-class citizens. One day after class, Julian returned a notebook that Sarah had left behind. Seeing that her friends teased her that Julian had a crush on her. There's a boy called Vincent who had actual crush on Sarah, asks her to see her drawings, and appears to return her feelings before insulting her for being Jewish. The next scene, Sarah observes a puppet show in a park making fun of Jewish people as hatred towards the Jews are on the rise. Max convinces Rose that they need to leave and tells Sarah that it will not be for too long. They will return after everything gets normal. Max instructs Sarah to continue to wear her winter boots to school until they leave. Time goes by and Sarah goes to school each day and secretly changes her shoes when she arrives. One day Sarah is pulled out of class when Miss Pettit-Jean receives a warning that Jews are being rounded up in town and the Germans are on their way to the school. The teacher lends Sarah her coat, and Sarah joins a group of students as their headmaster Pastor Luke helps them escape into the nearby forest. Vincent alerts the Germans to the plan and the officers begin chasing them. Sarah manages to get away while all the other Jewish classmates and Miss Pettit-Jean are rounded up. The German commander kills the boy who had been helping them by shooting him in front of the students. Julian finds Sarah and offers to help her escape by leading her into the sewers where his father works. Sarah reluctantly follows Julian, and he leads her safely to his place, where he tells her she can hide safely in the barn without being noticed by Germans. Julian leaves to tell his parents, and Sarah learns Julian's name for the first time. Scene shifts to present day, where the protagonist of our film Julian is surprised to learn he was intentionally named after Julian because the name meant so much to grandma. Scene again shifts to the past, where Julian's mother Vivian and father Jean-Paul show up and try to help make Sarah comfortable in the barn. They also promise to help track down Max and Rose. Sarah is instructed to remain hidden due to Julian's nosy neighbors, who was suspected to be a German informant. One night Julian brings Sarah art supplies, and Sarah feels sorry for never treating Julian with respect and kindness before. Weeks pass by and no one is able to track down Sarah's parents. In the evening, Julian gives Sarah school lessons and fills her in on classmate gossip. Vincent and other local boys are enlisted to join the local German army and given orders to patrol down and report suspicious behavior. Julian learns that his boss George, who works at the theater, is working with a rebel group, and he requests his help in obtaining forged documents to get Sarah out of France to safety in Switzerland. Julian tells Sarah that he would go with her if he wouldn't slow her down, and that he's always wanted to go to Paris. Sarah plays pretend and uses shadow puppets to give Julian the feeling of traveling. Julian struggles to play along, but is eventually able to share in the fantasy. 3 weeks pass by as the two continue to imagine adventures together and grow even closer, bonding over their love of film. Julian goes to the theater and discovers it has been ransacked by Vincent and his German patrol. Julian hides as the men destroy the rest of the theater, breaking chairs and shooting down the screen. Sarah consoles Julian and shares a book with him that contains sketches of the white bird Sarah envisions when she needs comfort and hope. George is captured by the Germans, and the hope for Sarah's escape is nipped in the bud. Seasons pass as the German occupation grows, and Sarah continues to live in the barn and grows closer to Julian due to their shared experience with each other. Sarah begins to develop romantic feelings toward Julian. One day, Vincent catches Julian stealing Sarah's sketchbook from Pastor Luke's and follows him back to the barn. Vincent and his comrades harshly beat Julian to the ground. He fights back and gets them to leave by waking up the bats in the barn. Sarah leaves her hiding spot to help, but Julian gets angry that she left the loft and put him and his family at risk. Julian refuses to visit Sarah for the next few weeks, and Vivian takes his place to help Sarah out. One night, Julian returns to the barn and both of them apologize for the way they have behaved. Julian acknowledged he was ashamed to appear weak in front of Sarah due to his disability. The seasons change and spring arrives. Sarah has now been in hiding for over a year. Julian, Vivian, and Jean-Paul come to the barn one day to celebrate Sarah's birthday. Julian gave Sarah a curved wooden bird, and the two shared a dance. The evening is interrupted by a broadcast that the Allies have freed a town in Italy, and everyone is hoping that it might be the end of the war. Later that night, Julian gets Sarah out of the barn for a taste of freedom in the forest. Julian confesses his feelings for Sarah and they kiss. In the present day, Grandma says she wished she had told Julian that she loved him that night. The next morning, Julian feels excited and decides to take the main path to school. Julian is apprehended by the German police on Vincent's orders, and that day Vincent discovers Sarah's sketchbook in Julian's satchel. They arrest Julian. A local man alerts Jean-Paul of Julian's arrest. Vincent goes on his own to search for Sarah, and he shoots fire in the barn. Sarah escapes into the woods. Vincent chases after her and catches her eventually, but a pack of wolves appears and violently attacks Vincent before he got away. Sarah returns to the Beaumy's home to look for Vivian and Jean-Paul and goes to their neighbor's home for help despite the risk. The neighbors threaten Sarah at gunpoint but quickly reveal that they are allies and themselves are housing a local rabbi and his wife who are being smuggled out that day by the rebels. Later, Vivian and Jean-Paul learn that Julian has been taken to a camp in the mountains with other handicapped people, though there is a chance he could be rescued for a steep price. The neighbors gave their money and Sarah agrees to remain hidden in the neighbor's attic. As Vivian rushes to try and rescue him, Julian and the other prisoners are taken to deep into the forest and executed. Devastated, Vivian and Jean-Paul return home and share the news with Sarah. Despite their grief, the Beaumys take care of Sarah until the end of the war that August. Sarah finally returns to school and continues to live with Vivian and Jean-Paul. 2 months later, Sarah is reunited with her father, who survived by hiding in a morgue, though her mother had been arrested on the day of the roundup and eventually died at Auschwitz concentration camp. Sarah continues to feel her mother's presence whenever she sees a white bird. Sarah and Max stay with the Beaumys for a while longer and then eventually move to Paris after a tearful farewell with Vivian at the train station. Grandma says she continued to visit the Beaumys and Vivian and Jean-Paul. They help Max walk her down the aisle at her wedding many years later. In New York, in the present day, Julian is upset by the story, but now he understands the importance of empathy. Grandma is celebrated at her retrospective at the Met, where she continues to carry the wooden bird she received from Julian. At school, Julian helps another student who is bullied and reaches out to a fellow student he has previously ignored. He agreeing to join her activism club. Grandma gives a speech explaining that she often has avoided telling her story, but no longer can remain quiet about the importance of speaking up against evil. In the crowd, she sees her friend Julian smiling at her. Outside the museum, she sees a white bird fly off into the sky, and the story ends here. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Leave your comment to let us know if you like the story.